Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Exo-6 have been pumping out their 1/6 scale Star Trek figures like no one's business this year. So I'm back today with another Star Trek 6 The Undiscovered Country release. And it is General Chang, one of the great Star Trek villains from the original movie series. This figure once again represents one of my most wanted pieces in this collection. I'm really excited to finally get my hands on this guy. So without further ado, let's dive straight in and take a look at the packaging. Now, as you can see, this is the standard Exo-6 packaging. It is a cardboard outer slipcase with a cardboard interior. It doesn't benefit from the stronger box that we've seen from some special releases such as the Motion Picture or The Search for Spock, which had those lovely hard cases which had the magnet in it where you just folded it open, had this wonderful display inside and had some fancy slip card. Unfortunately, that is not the case here, which is a real shame because I really love that approach. It feels more robust, it has a lot more presentation to it, and it just looks great on display. And whilst I wouldn't say I necessarily expected it with this release, given that we've already had Sulu and Valaris and neither of those had that deluxe treatment, with Chang I thought we might get it simply because he's much more expensive than those other releases. But clearly, sadly, that is not the case here. But what we get is perfectly suitable. It's in keeping with the rest of the collection. We have this lovely headshot of the figure itself and then a lot of black borders around it. It's still fairly displayable, still looks very nice. And of course, if we look at the side panel there, we have the image taken directly from the film. It is the movie poster. I love this artwork. I think it's a fantastic film poster. And it's absolutely right that we should see it represented here in all of its glory. There's not an awful lot else to say, really. If we flip it and look at the reverse, we have another shot of the figure and his various accessories, and then an awful lot of small print. It's not the most displayable thing in the world, but it's functional, I suppose. As ever, we can lift the outer slipcase up and reveal the figure underneath in this display window. There's not an awful lot really to talk about here. We can see the figure in his various bits and pieces, which is lovely. The rest is just simply black borders, and there's not really much to write home about. So it's with bated breath that we take a look at the figure itself. I must admit I was a little bit anxious. I haven't been disappointed by some of Exo-6's recent output, particularly Sulu from the same line, but I am pleased to say that I've been very impressed with Chang. For starters, if we take a look at this head sculpt, I think the likeness is absolutely spot on. This is a brilliant likeness of Christopher Plummer's General Chang, I think. I love the detail that we're seeing here. Of course, he's got his cranial ridges, which is actually really subtle on this particular character, but they've got that etched in here. Perhaps I would have liked to see a little bit more shading on the top of the head there, but there is plenty going on. We can see they've tried to add a little bit of a wash over the various ridges just to try and draw that detail out, which is really nice. I think what they've done with the moustache, the wrinkles around the eyes, of course the eye patch itself, is really gloriously done. But one of the things that really impressed me about this is actually the detailing around the neck, where we can see how the skin is a little bit mottled and a little bit wrinkled there. This is really accurate to what we see on screen, and a surprising level of detail which they've captured beautifully, I think. But as we can see, a lot of lovely details all around this figure. We've even got his ponytail sort of sculpted and painted in there, which again looks really neat. We can actually see a number of different washes in there, and it just really nicely captures this character. So I think they've done an excellent job with this likeness. Those who saw my Sulu video, which I will link to at the end of this video, will know that I had some gripes with the likeness there. I thought it was very off. This is spot on, and this is the kind of quality that I expect from Exo-6. If we take a look at the body, the tailoring here is exquisite. This is really high quality, and I'm very impressed with that. I think they've done a wonderful job with this. He does have that sort of plastic collar there. Again, the detailing, the shading, the paint apps are glorious. They've managed to capture that slight leather effect at the top of the collar there. We can see the wrinkles, which is really nicely done. He does have that lovely leather sort of tabard in terms of the bodice, which looks absolutely fantastic. My only minor gripe is that the shoulders maybe aren't quite accurate. They seem to be a lot puffier and a bit more elongated in the film. I did watch it again last night just to double check that, and this seems a little bit small and a bit flatter than the impression I have from the film. But nevertheless, it's a very minor thing. I still think it creates the effect, and I think it looks pretty good good overall. The stitching in there is beautiful. I think it's done a really nice job. Of course, underneath he has that wonderful fair-lined body piece, which is excellent. We did see this on the Krug figure as well, so they've simply recycled that, but it works very, very well. And again, I think it adds a lovely little touch, a little extra sense of texture and depth to this figure. There's a lot of different materials being used, which really help bring this character to life, I feel. Now, in terms of his sash, this is a one piece. It is obviously a rubber material that they've used. I've got mixed feelings on this. On the one hand, I think they've done a really nice job in terms of the sculpting, and the paint apps are, unquestionably really beautifully applied. I'm not sure in terms of the accuracy. I think that silver bit should be a little bit narrower, actually. It seems a bit broader here. They've actually got extra detail than I was able to see on screen, which is really nice. My gripe would be that in terms of the bottom part of it, this should be more of a chain effect, and I feel like this really should be metal instead of this rubbery plastic they've opted for. So that's a little bit disappointing. Another very minor gripe is the arm patch as well. Again, this is on an elastic band. Again, we saw this with Krug, but here it looks to be out of proportion because this is actually quite large on screen. I was looking at it last night and I was really surprised by how significant this is. It takes up a huge part of his arm, and this looks a little bit too small in terms of scale, which is a shame. But if we look at the belt, this looks to be spot on. Again, really nicely applied. Again, recycled from Krug. There's an awful lot has been recycled here, but to be fair, that's what they did in the film. They reused costumes and props all over the place, and Star Trek 6 was no exception. They even used parts of the Next Generation set to accommodate and save costs, I think. But hey, it's a fantastic result, and who's griping because it's such a great film. There is slight nuance to his boots, though. Whilst the trousers are the same and the boots are essentially the same sculpt, we do see a little bit of difference here. They are flared at the back, so those boots kind of open up, whereas Krug's were closed and wrapped around, which is nice. But also at the bottom of the feet there, we can see there's extra paint apps applied, and he has a slightly different toe. So whilst on first glance you could be forgiven for thinking that Krug and Chang have the same boots, actually there's some subtle differences between the two, which is really nice. It adds a little bit of nuance between those characters. The final thing I'll touch on is the display base. Again, this is what we saw with the Sulu. I really appreciate this because it is a little bit different to what we usually get. We usually get that generic blue base, a very flat base. This is obviously quite a different transporter base. It actually has a raised plinth, which is really nice, and that actually is sculpted in, which is lovely, and it has a different texture to it. So it's going to look a little bit different when you put this on display. So I really like that there's a distinction there between our Star Trek 6 figures and all the others, essentially. Let's take a look at the articulation then. He does have a ball joint at the base of the neck, so his head will rotate happily all the way around, and it will lean left and right a pretty healthy distance too, which is nice to see. Of course, that means he can also bend it forwards and backwards, and again, there's a huge range of motion here, which is very, very pleasing. He's got ball joints in the shoulders, of course, so his arms will lift up and out. There's a bicep swivel up there, so he can rotate his upper arm, and there's a double pin at the elbow, allowing that hand to touch all the way back to his head, which is glorious. No hindrance here whatsoever. He does also have the standard pin swivel at the wrist there as well, so the hand will rotate all the way around, despite having that gauntlet in place, which is lovely, and of course it will hinge forwards and backwards as well. Now, there is some articulation in the torso. I'm not quite sure where the joints are. He can move from side to side. It's a bit of a struggle with the layers that he's got there, particularly that leather corset, unfortunately, but he can move from side to side. Likewise, he can bend forwards and backwards a pretty decent distance, actually, more than I was probably anticipating, which is great, but it's a little bit of a struggle, in all honesty. Now, he's got ball joints in the hips, of course, so his legs will kick out to the side a decent distance. There's a thigh swivel up there as well, so you can get that to move around, which is nice. There's also one towards the top of the boot there, around the knee, which is really nice. The legs will kick forwards a pretty good distance, which is great. I thought there might be more resistance here, but actually that kicks all the way out there, which is lovely. And likewise, it'll go back a little bit. The knee will bend all the way back there, which is fantastic. A double pin there, which is really nice to see. So you can really kick that leg back, but unfortunately, that's it. You can't do anything with the feet because that boot is molded in one piece, so there's no articulation at the feet at all. Now, when it comes to accessories, I must admit I'm a little bit underwhelmed. All we get is an additional 2 pairs of hands, so closed fists and some gripping and pointing hands, and his Klingon disruptor. this is a real shame. I do take issue with this because if we compare this to Commander Krug, who came with so many accessories, including his cloak, his communicator, etc., there's just so many different props that really made that figure feel very full and well defined. Like there's nothing else I could imagine coming with Krug. I can't say that about Chang. He feels incredibly light, and considering he comes in relatively the same price point, it being a lot more expensive than the other figures in this line, I'm not quite sure why we're not getting some other bits and pieces. Now, to be fair, Chang doesn't really require an awful lot more, but he doesn't really use his disruptor, so it's an interesting one that they gave him that, when I would have liked him to maybe have had a glass of Romulan ale that he toasts in the film, or his communicator, which he does use when he's on the transporter pad. He also has a different look during the trial sequence where he has an extra cloak, some robes there. It would have been nice if they included that, so we could have recreated that look for him. There's just little things that could have been included here that they haven't. That's really kind of disappointing and a missed opportunity, especially given the higher price point. In terms of the Klingon Disruptor, we've had this before with the Krug figure. It is identical, same sculpt, same paint apps, really nice prop, a really lovely piece, so I have no quibbles with that whatsoever. And as you would hope, he has no problems holding it. He has a specially crafted hand to grip this, even though I think in the film we'd never actually see him with this in his hand. It's lovely to have, and he looks great holding it. So I have no issues there. Of course, he's able to put it into his holster nice and easily as well, and it looks great in place. The additional hands are nice, and of course you can create different looks with this character because of them, which is great. So obviously he's got his closed fists here, so even though he doesn't see any action in the film in terms of fisticuffs, he does get quite excited during the trial sequence, so you can recreate that if you wish. And when he's got this hand here, this one actually threw me a little bit. I couldn't really understand where that had come from, and I realised, even though I'm posing it all wrong here, that it actually comes towards the end of the film when he's in his captain's chair and he's directing the artillery to fire the torpedoes at the Enterprise. So as a result, this doesn't really work in the context of a standing pose. It looks a little bit odd. It kind of looks like he's breaking into a rap or something at this point, but I think this would work very well if we had a captain's chair for Chang where you could simply recreate the end scenes of Star Trek 6. At the time of speaking, I don't know whether there are any intentions from Exo-6 to start replicating this. It wouldn't surprise me if they do put out a line of enemy captain chairs. We do have it for some of our captains in the main line, so perhaps we'll see it for Chang as well further down the road. So then, final thoughts from me, wrapping up for today. I really, really like this figure. I think it is a real return to form for Exo-6 after having a bit of a wobbly year, in my opinion. Some of the most recent releases have been a little bit underwhelming and a bit disappointing, certainly the ones that I've picked up anyway, and I by no means pick up every figure they put out, but I have noticed a little bit of a dip in quality recently. However, this feels like a proper return to form. This is very much on the standard and the scale of Krug, who I think is one of the top figures in this collection, in my personal opinion. This is a real high-level entry. Perhaps that's why they justify the extra cost, I'm not sure. But I do think we're seeing an awful lot of materials being used. The tailoring is exquisite. The sculpting is fantastic. The only underwhelming element to this figure, in my opinion, is the accessories, but aside from that, I think this is a real solid entry, and for a much loved character, a real centerpiece of the collection, I think they've done him justice, so I'm very, very pleased with the end result. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving the video a like. That kind of thing really does help the channel out, and it allows me to keep making more content. And if you're interested in seeing more content, remember to hit subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos coming soon.